will teach you the most insane opening in chess, the most insane non-meme, non-troll opening. This is a legit opening. This is being played by Grandmasters, and just out of the opening we will get these two gals on the board, with these two still being on the board just right out of the opening. 4 queens on the chessboard. Let's get into it. I am ASMR Chess. This is a WorldChess chessboard, and if you want it, there's a link in description with a discount code. So, if you have the white pieces, this is something you can get into if you start by playing pawn to d4. And yeah, we will just go over the moves, and then I'll show you an example game afterwards, so you can see the kind of complete insanity and mayhem that is going to ensue. And yeah, it's just an exploration of how amazing and deep chess is. But first, let's thank our sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant is where you learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in science, math, and more. Their hands-on approach makes even complex topics easy to understand and fun to explore. I've been diving into Brilliant's science courses lately, and it is amazing how they teach you to predict how systems work. Whether it's understanding how forces interact or how energy flows, it's really exciting to see these concepts applied in real life and get a clearer sense of how everything is connected. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/ASMRchess, or you can scan the QR code on screen or use the link in the description. The link also gives you a 20% discount on an annual premium subscription. Thank you. We have to get into something called the Slav, the semi-Slav defense. So you go d4, they go d5, and you go c4. This c4 move is known as the Queen's Gambit, and there's of course all these ways they can defend the pawn, and for this to work they have to go with this Slav setup with defending with the c pawn. And here you're going to develop the knight, adding pressure here and thinking about the e4 square. And the e4 square is defended. This is so normal. You see this many times, thousands and thousands of games at both the club level and the Grandmaster level. Here you're going to play knight to f3, looking a little bit at the e5 square, helping clamp down on this freeing move. And now we get the semi-Slav structure. And this is the most popular way to get into this opening. Let's talk a little bit about it. There are also other ways you could reach this exact position with a bit of what we call transpositions. But it's a d4 opening, queen's pawn opening. These are usually a little more boring, a little more positional, a little more strategic long term instead of e4 openings, but it's not the case in this variation. And white is trying to put positional pressure on black by having always the option to capture this pawn. Of course, this pawn could be captured at some point by black, and that would be some sort of Queen's Gambit accepted line if that ever happened. There's a bunch of variations, and you can go to my video on the Queen's Gambit setup that I have on the channel, one of my most popular videos, where you can see a lot of different ways this can go for white. But in this particular variation, we will go into one of the many things white can throw at black, and one of the many counterpunches black can throw back, called the Moran variation of this Queen's gambit set up against the semi-Slav. And here you will play e3 just because you want to have this bishop be able to recapture on c4. So black doesn't capture here, doesn't want you to get your bishop out in one move. Instead, knight b to d7, all very, very standard. Now you will put your bishop out to d3. And in this position, black says, okay, now you did move the bishop, so now I will capture. And I know that you can recapture, and you will just recapture, getting this seemingly completely normal situation. It is a completely normal situation. Black just waited to capture this to make you move 2 times with the bishop, so you lost a little bit of time. And now we're going to get into the craziness. So in this variation here, b5 is the move chasing the bishop. And you could do a bunch of stuff with this bishop. You could put it back here, you could put it here, or you could put it here. But after this video, I am sure that you will always put it here because you will want to get into this complete insanity with the 4 queens coming up in just a short while. Now, bishop comes to b7 on the long diagonal. Black wants to play a6 and open up here, recapture here probably with the knight, or get the bishop out. Very simple plan, and then something like bishop here and castle. Simple plan for black, but that is not what is going to transpire, because you're going to force black's hand a little bit. You are going to play pawn to e4, which is actually a little trap. It looks like this pawn is very nicely defended by this knight, so that this knight cannot come in and capture it. What would black like to do very much in that position? Get this knight to move and then come in and capture here. And that explains pawn to b5, kicking the knight. And here you must be a little bit precise, because now the mayhem starts. So this is when things get really fun. You don't move the knight. Push this. This is the only move for white to maintain any sort of advantage. If you move the knight, you're worse. You have to play this. And interestingly, in order for black to have any sort of play and not just have a worse position, you have to capture the knight. Because if you move your knight, then, for instance, knight takes here, you will be worse with the black pieces. So that is why black must capture your knight. You will then capture their knight. And now what? What if they just capture your pawn? It's way more boring, but in this position you actually just take here, and black is worse. You're not winning by force or anything, but this bishop cannot come out to any of these squares, and even more importantly, this bishop has a very hard time getting into the game because it needs this pawn to move in order to open up. But of course this pawn can't really move, the square is controlled. So that is why black cannot easily take this pawn. If they do, you have a better position. Instead, to have any sort of claim to advantage, they must capture your pawn here. Are you going to recapture it? No. In that case, takes and takes, you'll actually just be down a pawn. So that's not going to work. Instead, you must bravely continue by capturing here. And this is all theory. This is all the correct way to play for both sides. You know, it looks insane, and it is insane, but it's correct chess. And again, they can't capture here. It's worse for black because you will capture here, and your position will just be better. Again, this bishop here is locked in, and there is pressure against this pawn, but you have it so well defended that you are in no trouble. You can castle, you can have a very safe king. This king cannot easily castle here with the pawn formation broken, and this pawn is forever weak. There will come a rook here, put pressure on the pawn. So, in order to have any sort of claim to any sort of attacking chances in this game, black must capture the rook and make a queen. And you will capture the rook and you will make a queen. And this situation, which looks bonkers, completely 100% bonkers, is a theoretical opening in the Moran. It's called the Four Queens. It's played by Grandmasters. And what can we say about the position you have reached with white? Well, you're actually pretty happy. And you're happy because material is equal. You have two queens, they have two queens. Knight, knight, bishop, 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 and rook, rook. But the positioning of the kings is what it's all about. You can castle at some point, have a very nice safe king. You can imagine with two opposing queens on the board, having a safe king is super important because you can very easily get checkmated. What about black? Well, black of course can't castle to the king side. There's no rook over here. And you could castle at some point to the queen side, but you don't have this strong wall. If you contrast these two, you have a strong wall here protecting your king, but here you don't. You do have pieces, but you don't have a lot of pawns, so the king is easier to attack. Normally, I will show a lot of variations in these openings to show, like, if they do this, your plan is this. If they do that, your plan is that. With four queens on the board, that is impossible. There are too many options. Like, I would have to show a million variations. So instead, I'm going to show the general strategy you want to play for. And I'm going to do that by showing you an example game played by two strong grandmasters, one just above 2600 and one almost 2600. So we are going to see with the white Vadim Milov and with black Artyom Timofeyev. And this game was played in 2017. So we will reset the board. So we'll put the extra queens outside of the chessboard, where maybe some people think they belong, but not us. Not us. We think they should join the fun. I'm going to show this game from 2017 between Vadim Milov and Artyom Timofeyev. So we follow this opening, starts with d4, d5, and the queen's gambit immediately challenging this pawn. And there is a bit of a move transposition instead of defending like this. In this case, black defended like this, but we do get into the same variation. After knight to c3, we see pawn to c6, and now we have this semi-Slav triangle. And white plays pawn to e3, the knight comes out, and the knight comes out, and now we have the Tabia position from the opening. And we see knight pd7, both players now following theory. The bishop comes out, and at this point black takes. Note that black only takes once the bishop has moved, in order to have the bishop lose a tempo. And b5 with an attack on the bishop, and the bishop drops back where? Not here, but all the way here in this position. And black plays bishop to b7, and this is the bishop that at the moment is happy as soon as this is played, and this is played with the knight and the bishop supporting the c5 pawn, opening up this bishop on the long diagonal. And this is where white starts to say, okay, I will put pressure on you immediately so that you will not have time to make this bishop strong. I will strike while it is still preparing to be strong. So striking with e4, and of course we do see pawn to b4 with an attack on the knight. And it is ignored. This pawn advances. Pawn takes knight. Pawn takes knight. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes queen and promotes to a pawn takes rook and promotes to a queen. Confusing myself. Pawn takes rook and promotes to a queen. And now let's see how two strong grandmasters are going to play in this position. Black has a different evaluation, a different idea than white. White is thinking that they do not need to strike immediately, but can have a more slow approach to attack black's king, and black is thinking, no, let me get the firepower out immediately with this check. And it's not blocked like this, because queens could be exchanged. No, it's blocked like this with the knight. And the queen swoops in, and just look at this. The queen here threatening here, the queen here threatening here. Already this these two queens are working. Like if it was black to move, we would win a bishop like this. But now white is saying, well, I played this opening because I can make this very nice castle, and now I have the rook and the queen protecting the bishop, so that if queen takes, queen takes, queen takes, rook takes, and white wins. Black says, well, I can just capture here. Now I'm up a pawn, and you're just defending, and I'm actually threatening to come in and capture the queen here, and if you capture, I'll exchange, we'll have a normal situation. But at this point, white is done being patient. White gave up this pawn, but only temporarily, and is not going to exchange the queens. No, going to play queen takes h7 to be equal on material. Again, it's so weird to look at this board with 4 queens on it. To be equal on material again, and saying, you know, you did spend a lot of move with the queens here attacking, but I have now the safe king. What about your king? Maybe I should start thinking about an attack. Knight comes to f6, looking at this queen here, attacking this queen, and also thinking about coming closer to the king here. So the queen goes all the way back and keeps a lot of control over the safe king. And black now castles to the queen side. So not only do we have 4 queens on the board, we also have opposite sides castling, which usually leads to an aggressive game. So it's an aggressive game with 4 queens on the board. And the pressure begins to mount immediately. Queen comes to c2 with an attack here. So this pawn is now attacked and pinned, and this queen is also attacking and pinning this pawn here to the king. So the queen starts to reposition herself and thinking about ways to defend black's position. And if you get something like this, you want to open up lines of attack. You want to have your bishops, your rooks, and everything pointed at the king. And remember that if you get the castle in and the queen stands on this square here, you can very often win a nice tempo. For instance, with the attack, with an attack from the knight, or perhaps by moving this bishop, opening up an attack from the rook. With this attack on the queen, the knight here is really thinking about getting close to the king, but it picks up this knight's tempo against the queen. The queen will have to move and goes all the way back here, kind of nicely looking at the dark squares. And maybe these 2 queens can somehow keep white at bay. But a lot of tempi being picked up against the queens. Bishop comes to b2 with an attack on the queen that now has to move again, but it has to move here to be somewhere where it's not cannot be captured by queens or something, and also keep in contact with the knight because this bishop is threatening to come here. And the bishop actually just drops back, winning another tempo against the queen. The queen could have dropped back here, trying to go for a repetition, but bravely the queen comes to e4 rather, hoping for an exchange of queens. But you know, in chess, in the opening, you're advised to not have the queen out too early, because she can be chased around and you can lose a lot of tempi. And with 2 queens, you can lose even more tempi. So bishop comes to do it d3, picks up another tempi against the queen. The queen goes back, and still everything looks like these 2 queens should be able to, you know, take care of the defensive task against this castle you see here on the board. But actually it's very difficult. Actually it's very, very difficult. This bishop now comes to d2, picking up yet another tempo against the queen. The queen comes back here to make some sort of Aljechin super gun. And yet another tempo picked up against the queen. So one of the things that you can also learn from this game is that with white you have this safe king, and you can have your queens hopefully somewhere a little bit safe, so you can use the remaining pieces to pick up all these tempi against the queens. And when your opponent tries to exchange the queens like they do here, black will play queen d4 here, being protected by the knight, wanting to exchange. Most of the time no. Here you see white going back with the best move, queen to c1, not wanting to exchange the queens. Black played knight coming in to d5, and another tempo picked up against the queen, this time with the rook. So you see the strategy here, picking up all these tempi, attacking the queens, and activating all the pieces so you can start to attack this king. Again, the queen has to move. meaning that with all these queen moves, this bishop hasn't moved at all, and this bishop moved once in the opening, but it still hasn't improved itself, still just looking into this pawn. And by contrast, all of white's pieces are now in play. This bishop is targeted with knight coming to a5. So probably this would be a pretty fine exchange maybe for black, because it lessens the burden of defense if there are fewer pieces. So the knight comes here trying to protect the king, opening up an attack from this battery here against this bishop. But white says, well, let me cash in here. Takes. We don't see takes here because that we would have the knight takes rook, therefore king takes the knight, and this bishop is under attack, and therefore it moves and it goes to d3, where it is nicely protected from multiple angles and is looking to squares very near the king. The queen comes to b4, bit of an enigmatic move, but still trying to keep the defenses together. And the bishop, which is under attack from the knight and from the queen, needs a place to go. And it doesn't want, you could go here nicely protected by this pawn, but this is the wrong diagonal. No, there's no king over here. You want to look at this diagonal here. And to not be in the way of any of the other pieces, you can actually use this little cool idea, going back all the way back to f1. Here black tried to develop this bishop, maybe get this rook out, start winning tempi against white's queen. But white starts to target and coordinate the queens, and of course this bishop is far away from the king, and this queen is now also far away from the king. Okay, knight comes in here to block and blunt this queen, but another tempo picked up against the queen. Queen goes to a5, trying to keep an eye on the bishop and an eye on the defensive squares around the black king. And finally, white says, maybe we should exchange some queens. And black really has no option other than to accept in this position, and in fact black's position is completely losing, and maybe you've had this feeling for a while now, and that's because black has been on the back foot in a serious way for a while now. But there's no other option here than to capture, and the other queen comes in with the recapture, and now we have maybe a little more normal looking position. However, the position is of course very dire for black. The queen looking at this pawn here with this devastating check. So black tried to defend with the rook, but sneaky bishop coming here to d6. Black will try to get out of the pickle, but we do see the check. And of course, maybe I should go back actually, because notice the sniper bishop all the way here. So with this little sneaky bishop move, we are now threatening this checkmate. So maybe I should be more specific here. So that's a checkmate threat, which is why we see this. But still the check is being thrown, and the king moves over. The queen comes in. The knight is absolutely instrumental in covering these two checking squares, but the rook is under attack, and it cannot be defended by anything else than the king, so it comes here, and we can see how the infiltration has worked extremely nicely, and these pawns here are disconnecting the queen from coming in to help the defense. Just one last precise move and you will be winning. So if you do this thing with tucking the bishop in here, the sniper bishop being very nicely defended and defending the king here, remember that it's still there and that it can sweep out just when you need it, and in this case it came to a6, and this rook is under attack. Queen takes rook would be checkmate, backed up by the bishop. And if you try and defend the rook with something like this, well, the knight, as we discussed earlier, was instrumental in defending these two squares, and if it goes here, it's not defending here, so this would be checkmate. So that would not work. So black tried moving the rook here instead, where it is defended by the knight. Black said yum yum yum. White said yum yum yum. I'll capture that. That's check, but it is defended. Okay, so what is the follow-up? Check, the last piece getting into the game. The knight blocks the check, and the queen can come here and grab this pawn, and you can see how it's very, very difficult to defend against the combination of these three pieces. This was tried, a very nice try. Don't blunder checkmate here. So queen comes to g4, threatening the rook. But of course, white gets to move every other turn and can move with check, not giving black time to capture the rook. And here we have a check, and the king comes to d7. And this rook is now defended in a just very cool way. It sacrifices itself. It captures the knight. And that means that this does not work as checkmate, because you could go back and capture it. So the rook comes in and captures here. And if pawn takes rook, what's the point? You lose the queen, because the pawn here is pinned to the queen, can you see? Therefore, black desperately tried queen to a4 with an attack perhaps on the bishop, but it is currently defended by the queen, and also there is checkmate in one, so probably this was some part of time trouble. So can you find the checkmate in one move? This is how queen comes to d8, and that is checkmate, like this. And maybe it's a bit of an extra satisfaction that the queen ends up in this 4-queen game on the starting square of the other queen. And I actually have no idea if this is the original queen, and if this is the original queen, or if those are the new queens. Maybe you can tell me in the comment if you tracked that. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you had any games where you were able to play this absolutely insane variation. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the game, and I hope I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.